Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to This Week in Bitcoin. Today is April the 19th, 2019. Strong hand. This is where the big boys play. Offended by selling. Value your wealth in Bitcoin. Unconfiscatable. 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin. Okay, we've got some special guests on the show. It is This Week in Bitcoin. We're here every Friday, of course, with a great panel. And Zack has returned. And, of course, Jeff Vandrew Jr., he has returned. And introducing Tony Sanek. He's here in the house straight out of Vancouver, representing the West, representing a different country. They're all linked to below. So I want to start off by reading a tweet that kind of sums up some stuff that happened at the beginning of the week. And we've all heard about it, but let's hear what these guys have to say about it. You are all acting like you have never seen an altcoin get delisted before. If a chain has real demand, some exchanges will list it because there is money to be made. Carry on. And that was Matt Odell said that. I thought that was a very good tweet. And it just makes me think about there are a lot of outspoken people out there, a lot of lawsuits flying around, a lot of centralization flying around. Jeff, what do you think about this delisting situation?
I mean, I have mixed feelings. I mean, I think ultimately, I think it was good that it was delisted. My concern is that it might not have been delisted for the right reasons, right? So BSV doesn't really deserve to be listed because it's a centralized coin that's essentially controlled by a cult of personality around one guy with limited liquidity, right? Those are all good reasons not to list a coin. The fact that he's done some unsavory stuff as it relates to his personal life, probably, despite the fact that it is very unsavory, probably not the best reason to delist an altcoin. So I guess the short story is glad it's delisted, kind of, I guess, somewhat unhappy that, personal issues like this are what it took to get the coin itself delisted.
All right. Zack, what do you think?
I think Jeff, what he just said is basically one and the same thing. Like the Bitcoin Satoshi's vision market or investor base is so small that Craig's personality reflects so strongly on it. So delisting it for his behavior makes sense in the sense that he's sort of leading the culture around the coin for all intents and purposes. Now, a lot of people may try to hardcore stand Bitcoin Satoshi vision for a variety of inexplicable reasons and try and deny that Craig has any influence on their investment or whatever, but he's undeniably the champion of the coin. And so when he attacks other people in the space that he's creating this coin in, exchanges who are also participating in the same financial and social space reasonably can react and say, look, we don't want your asset trading on our platform because we don't like you. Like Jesse I think he tweeted it out, or maybe it was in a blog article, I don't remember, but he was like, look, this is the first time we ever delisted something because the founder ended up being an asshole. And it's not just because he's doing things totally unrelated to crypto, he's being an asshole in this space that his little coin project is involved in. So it makes total sense. And I 100% agree, 110% agree with Matt Odell. It's not a big deal at all. Maybe the shortness of the sequence that these exchanges were delisting this asset in was a little bit unprecedented. Maybe I don't know. That's an open question. I'm not insinuating anything. But even if it is unprecedented, no one gives a crap about it. It's just the way it is. Exchanges list and delist as they wish, and BSV is now delisted from a bunch of major exchanges. Having said that, I saw a couple tweets about these BSV only exchanges or whatever that are popping up to provide liquidity for the market, which is great. It's a free market. People can delist your asset, and if people still want to trade it, someone's going to try and meet that demand. And if there's no demand, then your asset probably sucks. So all in all, it's a great development.
Yeah, that was the bottom line right there. That really was. Tony, what do you think?
So yeah, I agree with Zack and Jeff, but I want to add something to it. So this whole situation, in my opinion, shows attack vector like into the cryptocurrencies, because basically if your project have some kind of centralized figure that is basically like the face of the coin, we all know what happened with like Satoshi. He was smart enough to mitigate this attack vector, and basically he was anonymous. He stepped aside. There is no central figure in the Bitcoin space. Like, try to delist Bitcoin because like you or me would do something bad in our like personal lives. Like, there is no guy in Bitcoin like the Craig Wright was in the BSV. So this is showing the great attack vector on those cryptocurrencies like Ethereum with Vitalik, like Litecoin with Charlie. It all shows like those attack vectors, and it's like funny to see that Satoshi was smart enough to like he thought about it probably before he even created the coin. So that's great. And yeah, this is what I wanted to add.
Yeah, it is the perfect example of why having a centralized leader is an attack vector. If people didn't get it before, now they're going to get the big difference between Bitcoin and all the rest, which have these centralized leaders. This is the lesson we can take from the drama from the beginning of the week. And I do hope this is the end of that drama, and we can, because it's always good to ignore that person that some of you said his name. I don't even try to say his name. He just thrives off of that attention. And there's just some people that are like that, I guess. And you gotta just don't give them the attention. All right.
Well,
so
can I add one more thing in there?
Please.
There's a corollary to what Tony said. Basically, the attack vector. Chris DeRose is sort of famous for reiterating the issue that he views centralized exchanges as an attack vector for Bitcoin. And we just saw sort of this hypothetical attack vector being exploited for BSV. And whether or not I think it's less relevant that Satoshi's identity is unknown than that Bitcoin is so expensive relative to previous price points it's seen before or traded at before. Like, if BSV was trading at, or I should take it back one more notch, exchanges only list assets because they can make money off of them. So if you're an asshole, but your asset is being traded at like $15,000, $20,000, $50,000, like, they're not just going to give up that profit and let someone else swoop in and claim that part of the market. But because your asset is terrible, and I'm trying really hard not to curse right now for you, my man, because your asset is terrible and you're a terrible person, exchanges have no problem delisting a low volume asset because you're also an asshole. But there's no one is going to exploit this theoretical attack vector of Bitcoin and just delist Bitcoin or something, because there is so much money to be made. Like, the profit around Bitcoin is its greatest security feature in a number of ways. The most relevant to this conversation of which is the fact that it prevents these more or less kingmakers in the crypto space from just obliterating the liquidity, a lot of which does take place on their platform because Bitcoin is so valuable. Just want to nip that a little bit in the bud, which, as a corollary to what you were talking about, the attack vector of Satoshi's identity and the founder's identity and whatnot. Founder's identity can be an attack vector, but exchanges won't react if your asset is profitable to them. And Bitcoin is. BSV is clearly not.
Good. Very, very good point. Very good point. Hey, but I mean, BSV people can do their own exchanges and then make it profitable. Or, I mean, good luck to them. Good luck. Anyone can, you could have a Bcash based exchange. I wasn't going to bring this up, but I guess I asked Jeff this because I thought you were going to get into this. Do you think Bcash should be? You said you've always thought that BSV shouldn't be listed. Thus,
Right.
Should Bcash not? Or are you one of those guys that are like, I'm disappointed BSV is listed has been delisted because Bcash hasn't been delisted?
Well, I mean, I don't believe in any of these coins, to be 100% honest with you. But, at the current time, it's a free market and there's money to be made in selling Bcash, right? And it does seem to have at least somewhat more liquidity than BSV. If I were running an exchange, would I want to list it? Well, I kind of believe in the old quote that I originally heard it from Safety: if you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes, right? So in the short term, you might make some money. Long term, I'm not so sure. But to get to the heart of your question, BSV is certainly Bcash is certainly less centralized, as much as it pains me to say this, as compared to BSV. So I would not take the extra leap that just because BSV was ridiculous to list, Bcash is also ridiculous to list, at least in comparison to other altcoins that are being listed that are frankly even more ridiculous, right? I mean, there's exchanges that list Ripple, and that's just a single corporation basically just shilling their own script. So, you know, when you look at it from that perspective, I don't have the same, I guess the best way to put it is I don't have the same level of scorn for listing Bcash that I do BSV.
Okay, there you go. There's a good take on that right there. And he said some hard to accept facts for some people there, but yeah, BSV is in a whole another realm when compared to Bcash. Okay, enough. Oh God, I feel dirty talking about all these altcoins and such. Let us move on to something that was, some people talked about this. I talked about this earlier in the week. Afghanistan and Tunisia's central bank governors say state Bitcoin bonds can help access needed investment. So basically, we've got talk out of Afghanistan, of all places, that they're going to issue Bitcoin bonds. It sounds okay. It wasn't really clarified in the article exactly what they meant. I mean, I personally wouldn't trust the government of Afghanistan, of all governments, to pay me back anything if I were to give them, to buy a bond from them. Zach, what did you think about this?
I saw headlines for it and a little discussion on Twitter. I honestly didn't read articles around it. I mean, it's interesting. People are exploring new ways to incorporate Bitcoin in a variety of ways into existing like financial tools and products. Whether or not it actually launches, and after that, whether or not people actually buy these Bitcoin bonds, are two pretty big open questions. But it's cool to see. It's always cool to see like sovereign nations pay positive attention. I would probably categorize this as more or less positive attention to Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency, digital asset space, whatever you want to label it in general. And yeah, I guess agree, like on balance, there's no real like negative takeaway from this. Like they're like proposed plans or like hypothetical plans. I don't know if they were actually like proposing this or set a date when these would be available for purchase. But yeah, interesting, cool. Pretty, I would say maybe a little bit too harsh, but this is pretty insignificant in the grand scheme of like adoption, at least right now, and maybe long term in the future. But if someone wants to toy around with Bitcoin bonds, like be my guest, go for it. And it's always cool to see sovereign nations play with Bitcoin. So,
do you think we'll see some bigger countries actually get into this and do this? Do you see this actually happening? Because again, this is all theoretical right now.
Bonds or just government
Bitcoin bonds, Bitcoin-based bonds issued by governments.
Maybe. I mean, whenever like state and local governments or sovereign nations, like federated governments, do something new, other governments are always obviously watching. And so if Afghanistan and whatever the other country was, like happen to have some sort of marginal amount of success with this Bitcoin bond proposal, then other governments will already be watching and will probably jump on this train too. And if not, then we can all just laugh at them and move on to something else. So, I mean, it just depends on if these people who are trying to like pioneer this have any sort of success.
Well, good luck, Afghanistan, Tunisia, and Uzbekistan. Yes, those were the three countries mentioned. Hang on one second. CraigShip.com says pound that like button and the bell and follow Adam. Yes, pound that like button. All right. Tony, what do you think about these Bitcoin bonds?
Yeah, so I also think that this isn't huge in terms of like adoption in the grand scheme, but reading this article, I saw like few red flags. For example, there was a mention of Hyperledger in it very often. So I don't know what kind of Bitcoin bonds are there, but are they stored on some kind of Hyperledger blockchain, which isn't really blockchain? Yeah, I had those red flags when I'm reading about tools like that. Also, what about securing the keys? Because your Bitcoin is your Bitcoin, and if you are lending it to somebody else, it's not your Bitcoin anymore. Even for like a few percent, I wouldn't trust anyone with storing my keys, because storing the keys is a hard job to do. And also, it's like another product to make Bitcoin like relate to the legacy financial systems, and it's like I'm seeing it all the time. Like those legacy financial people are they are basically playing with this kids toy where you have those shapes and you are trying to fit them into the cavities. And for example, Bitcoin is the rectangle, and they are trying to mash it into like the circle cavity or the triangle cavity. They are just trying to fit it in, and they basically can do that so easily because Bitcoin has its own rules. And yeah, this is how I see it.
Well, you bring up a great point. How can you trust that you're even going to get it back? And there was a lot of mumbo jumbo in the article about Hyperledger. I was like, do these people even know what they're talking about? Are they just trying to get some attention to their country? When I started reading the I lost my way. It got a little confusing there when I heard about Hyperledger. Jeff, will you be sending Hamid Karzai your Bitcoin anytime soon?
I don't think it's actually a real story, and I'll explain what I mean by that. I think that it's one of two things. One, that it was done just for publicity, as you mentioned, or two, that, as some people have speculated on Twitter, that it's like a lost in translation issue. And the reason that I think that is that it's wholly illogical. So if you're a sovereign government collecting taxes and other receipts in your native currency and issuing bonds in Bitcoin, that's equivalent to taking a massively risky short position in Bitcoin, an asset with potentially very high volatility fairly quickly by doing that. The only reason as a country with control over your own currency why you'd want to issue bonds in another currency is if you had trouble obtaining credit in your home currency, right? So you feel that it would be easier to obtain credit, and therefore the risks of issuing a bond that's not denominated in the same currency as the currency over which you control is outweighed by the greater access to credit. However, in the case of a country like Afghanistan or any of these other countries, if they were going to do that, it's much less risky for them to issue euro denominated or dollar. Is huge appreciation in the dollar or the euro against their home currency. It's not the same level of risk as Bitcoin, right? Where we've seen run-ups over a couple months of, from a few $1,000s to $20,000 per Bitcoin. So that's why I don't think this is a real story. It's just either an attention-seeking thing, or they're proposing issuance of some sort of blockchain-based bond that has nothing to do with Bitcoin. And between the potential language issues and the fact that nobody that reports on this stuff understands it, the word Bitcoin just got thrown in there. That's my theory on it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they're creating their own altcoin on Hyperledger. Who knows what it is? Jeff, you're fading in and out a little bit there. I don't know. You might want to try it out without your picture or something like that. But I'll get back. Okay. I'll get back to you in a second. So moving on, this was in the news, and I'm connecting it to Bitcoin here. The Trump administration will cap money sent by U.S. citizens to their relatives in Cuba to $1,000 per person every 3 months, reversing President Obama's lifting of all such restrictions. Cuba is highly dependent on remittances from the United States, which amounted for $3 billion in 2016. Now, all right, cutting the remittances to Cuba, that's not going to they're not going to be all of a sudden be a lot of people sending Bitcoin back and forth. It's not that big. The reason I bring it up is because if Trump is willing to do that, people have suggested to him to cut remittances to Mexico. and to Honduras and to these other countries. Now that's a lot of money being sent back and forth. So I think that would make a huge, I think people would start using Bitcoin at that point for their remittances. So I hope Trump does take it to the next level and ban remittances to those Central American countries and Mexico. Zack, do you think that's a real possibility that this could happen? And do you think it would make a big difference that those people would start figuring out, like, okay, we can't send remittances back to the traditional way. We're going to do it with Bitcoin now.
Yeah, obviously, I think there's like a chance worth talking about that this could happen. I don't have any data in front of me on like per country annual remittances sent to like Cuba and other Latin American countries, but it's obviously like somewhat material amount of money. Mostly just like personally, I'm annoyed that the U.S. keeps like taking these hostile foreign policy stances towards Cuba and other countries because they're beautiful and I want a vacation there. But specific to like monetary policy, it's like well, maybe not necessarily now, but within the next 5 years for sure. Like it's the perfect storm of development around Bitcoin that would make this scenario where Cubans or Mexicans or anyone from a Latin American country living in the United States trying to send money back to their family, relatives, friends in their home country could use a variety of tools and software built for Bitcoin, specifically like layers on top of Bitcoin. And like Latin America right now, specific to tools that people in those countries can use, we see like enormous explosion, which I still don't completely understand, but enormous explosion of like crypto ATMs, which apparently is a wildly profitable market to be like building a business in right now. Jeff, I think your mic's on. But yeah, I think it's obviously a great use case, and like certain policy developments that make it like more likely that people will use Bitcoin as an alternative to like opt out of these sort of inconvenient and arbitrary restrictions set on their remittance sending abilities is obviously great. So it's great for it could be great for the price, but it's also great that there exists this option that people can opt out and use something else and say, like, I don't care, pass whatever policies you want, I'm still going to send money wherever I want. And that's just the beauty of Bitcoin.
Tony, what do you think about remittances?
Yeah, so in the political stance, I feel it should be all open to all the countries. But when we are speaking about Bitcoin, I think the Bitcoin tools are already existing for like the Southeast Asia countries. If you want to like hire somebody there, there are tools like Bitwage, I guess, on the market since like 2017, and you basically can like outsource the work there. But when it comes to remittances, I don't know, I just want them to be open, because why not?
Yeah, but I like people being free to send their money back and forth, but the way remittances are currently set up traditionally, they can be cut off. They are centralized, and it would prove that Bitcoin is a true decentralized way to send your money across borders. People would see, well, wait a second, Trump can shut down Western Union or whatever. Why have we been dealing with all these years? Let's learn about something that no president, that no person can shut down. So
that's why I give it like 5 years, maybe. Like if Trump passed that legislation today for Cuba and all other Latin American countries, I'm not sure. I think people would be just mostly screwed, but there would be a small percentage of people that would use Bitcoin. It's just there's in the next 5 years, there's just so much wrong with Bitcoin's UI UX experience for a lot of these applications that a lot of people, it would just be brutal for them to actually try and use Bitcoin for what it's meant to be used for. So over the next 5 years, I am incredibly bullish. Like, I mean, over the past 5, 7, 8 years, we've seen an immense improvement, which also goes to show how terrible it was 5 years ago. But over the coming 5 years, these applications that allow people to use Bitcoin for what it's meant to be used for, like this specific case, will just radically improve. But I don't know. I have mixed feelings, and if this was to be passed today, if people be forced to like limit like $1,000 a month or $1,000 every 3 months or something, Bitcoin obviously is meant to fill that void of like value transfer, but it would just be a brutal experience, and we obviously want to optimize for not that.
Yeah, you bring up a reoccurring theme, the user experience, user interface. It's still hard. It isn't. It might not be something that people that are, you know, not that well financially and are working long hours and sending money. They might not be that skilled to even get into the Bitcoin. I mean, it's not. Bitcoin hasn't had its Netscape moment yet, where you know, the internet was very.
True.
Once Netscape came about, the user interface was much easier for the internet than it previously had been. So this is a point. But there is, I do want to, again, I mean, this is my opinion, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct on this. There's a big difference from what Trump is doing to Cuba, because it's just not as many people, and it's then totally cutting off remittances to Mexico and Honduras and Guatemala, which some people are proposing. That would be a tremendous news story, first of all. And so it would wake a lot of people up, and really, it would put people in a pretty brutal situation. And I think they would learn Bitcoin quickly, but it wouldn't be easy. Jeff, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone pretty much touched on all the important points. It's just my only thought is that it's a market opportunity for some more Bitcoin adoption. You know, it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's not going to be that all these people are going to immediately move to Bitcoin if it happens, because of the UI UX issues that everyone else mentioned. But nonetheless, we should look at it as an opportunity.
Maybe we should just talk about some UI and you. When do you guys think this is going to? When is it going to be a little bit easier, man? Because, you know, it's been around for 10 years, and it scares people off when they see these public addresses that are just a bunch of numbers and letters, and it can be. I mean, I really couldn't show it to my mom yet, and for her to be comfortable at all. It's not even close to that. I mean, Jeff, you got some technical skill there. What are some predictions on your part for UI? For user experience improving?
It's incremental. I think a big part of the reason why the UI UX stuff has lagged is because for the past 10 years, we've been working on the back end, right? I mean, that's really needed a lot of improving, and that's changed a lot over these years. Everything from SegWit to Lightning. I mean, Lightning is I don't know, how many of our listeners have a technical background, but if you really dig into the source code for Lightning and really look at the protocol, I mean, it's a very, very, very complicated protocol. So until a lot of that sort of stuff gets straightened out, not that we shouldn't be working on UI, UX at the same time, but as the back-end protocols change, the front-end UI, UX stuff is going to keep struggling to keep up. And I think that's going to be the case for a while longer.
All right, Tony, you're a Lightning guy too. By the way, people check out all these guys' links below. Tony's got a channel, by the way, and he was the Raspberry Pi guy I mentioned. We'll mention that at the end of the show. User experience, user interface. Tony, what do you think about that stuff?
So, like with all, there are levels to it. So basically, you can either have super centralized wallet on your phone, which basically connects to the server of the creator of the wallet, and I guess everybody can use that because it's like just an app on the phone, up to the point where you have your own node, you've got your own Lightning Network node, and you are basically doing transactions from your own node and either some kind of Electrum servers or something like that. You can basically have many levels of your own security, but when it comes to like user experience, it's the ones that are the less secure in terms of the backend. They are the easier to use because this is what it is, and you can basically grade your UI how much you want, because there is a ton of wallets, ton of applications. You can use hardware wallets. Even right now, there are new pull requests to the Bitcoin core software, that you can basically use your own Trezor, Ledger, or any other hardware wallet with your Bitcoin core, Bitcoin node. So yeah, I think we are moving there, but the incremental is very slow, as Jeff said. We were mostly focused on the backend, and until the backend is like super easy to deploy, until everybody can deploy their own Bitcoin validator into, for example, phone, maybe in terms of Neutrino or any other software like that. We have to wait for this point to come, and then we can basically have very secure Bitcoin with the great UI.
Pound that like button, bring on that great UI. Zach, when do you foresee this happening, or are you frustrated also?
I mean, I'm not frustrated, but I also spend way more time, as I'm sure all of us do, like using and testing these products and stuff than the average person would want to or can afford to. I think Jeff's spot on. It's a great point that we spend so much time on the back end, and the UI, UX, front end development, design work will come in its turn. But it's a good point to note. I also think just at a higher level, the monumental challenge of taking this piece of technology that we've never really sort of successfully deployed before, that gives its users an unprecedented amount of financial and like individual responsibility to manage these assets that they're holding now, in a way that's sort of as convenient and easy to use as the applications, the incumbent applications, products and services that it's trying to replace, is just like a fucking unbelievably large challenge. So there is some patience that's due, but also like it just kind of sucks right now. The UI UX user experience elements of all these Bitcoin and Lightning products. So it'll change, and there's a variety of reasons, as we've noted, why it's not better right now. But it's a pretty big ask to make the user experience as good as other products that Bitcoin is trying to, or would ideally replace. So I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot.
Defer gratification with that stuff, guys. It'll come eventually. I mean, it'll eventually. Just as the internet was hard once, Bitcoin can be hard for some people now. And
you should here's some official financial advice. You should try and buy some Bitcoin before the user experience improves too much, because once it improves, everybody will use it. There's just really no reason not to at least play around with it. I think the biggest barrier, maybe one of the bigger barriers for sure, to like using or exposing yourself to Bitcoin and the Lightning Network and all these different applications and things that are being built around it, is how difficult they are to use. Because a lot of people understand like payment systems suck. They're like, modern banking is incredibly inconvenient and efficient in a variety of number of ways that frustrate people on a day-to-day basis. But the UI UX of like Bitcoin and Lightning products is so bad that a lot of people are just like, oh, that's like weird internet money. They may try and play around with it and find it too difficult and forget about it. But when the UI UX is up to speed, you should probably consider owning some Bitcoin before we reach that point.
That was an incredible point. Pound that like button, people. That's what you get on this show. That was really good, Zach. That was, yeah, people. If it's easy, you're too late. So no, you're never too late. You're never too late. But it's not easy now. So you're in.
Well, as an analog, like back when Bitcoin first got a price, you had to be basically like a pro C++ developer to like get any Bitcoins. And now we have this army of centralized exchanges, and we're sitting at like a $5,000+ price, and it's still pretty inconvenient. But that's an enormous return from like 10 cents to 5K, and the UI UX is still awful. So the more it improves, the more expensive it'll get. Just, I mean, buy accordingly or don't. I don't care.
Yes. Strong, and people who already have it, think about that too. You don't want to keep your hands strong. You don't want to regret selling it before it became easy to use. All right, so Jeff brought this up to me, or Jeff had a tweet about this, which informed me about this situation that I didn't know about. And I'm bringing this up because Gab, they're fans of Bitcoin, okay? And maybe they can incorporate Bitcoin in some way. Gab is forking Brave to keep the privacy stuff while removing the dumb bot altcoin. And we successfully forked Brave's open source code base and have a build-up. So I'll only ask Jeff about this, since this was a topic you tweeted about. What's going on over there? What's the latest with Gab? What are your thoughts?
So basically, here's the story. Gab's latest product, which I think has become already more popular than their social network, is essentially a browser extension that will allow you to comment on any website. So it's censorship resistant in that only Gab could censor it, right? And they seem pretty committed to not doing so. And anyone that has this browser extension, because it works on the front end, can see whatever comments other people. It's called Dissenter, the extension. Anyone that uses Dissenter can see all the comments posted by everyone else that uses Dissenter. And because it's rendered through JavaScript on the front end, the underlying website itself can't stop the comments. They can't censor the comments. So they put this out a while back. And then Columbia Journalism Review did a story on it. And as journalists do nowadays, their Columbia Journalism Review is obviously very opposed to the concept of free speech for anyone other than professional journalists. So CJR tattled on Dissenter to both the Google Chrome extension store and the Mozilla extension store and got them delisted. So you can still install the extension by going to Gab's website, but you can't do it from the stores. So based on this, Gab decided to come up with its own browser, which would have the Dissenter extension built into it by default so that people wouldn't have to go to the Gab website in order to do it. And the way they decided to do that was by forking, as I mentioned in my tweet, forking Brave to keep all the privacy features of Brave. And then in the fork, they're going to remove the BAT altcoin stuff. They're going to add the Dissenter extension to make that an integral part of the browser. And there's been some speculation that they may at some point integrate Lightning payments as well, although we don't know that for sure. So Brendan Eich kind of freaked out about this on Twitter and called Andrew Torba a parasite for forking his browser and removing the altcoin. So he was very upset. One of the more amusing parts of the exchange was someone commented, well, you know, forking isn't being a parasite, you know, yada, yada, yada. And Brendan's response was, well, it's silly to fork just for an extension. And the person indicated, well, you know, that may be true or not true, but they want to make it easier. They want it to be a default option. Brendan's response was that, you know, people are never going to install a new browser anyway, so that was silly. To which Gab responded, I think, quite astutely, then why are you running a browser company? If you believe that no one's going to install a new browser, why bother, you know, running a browser company? So that's basically where we stand. It was a little Twitter feud that broke out between Andrew Torba and Brendan Eich regarding this fork. Overall, I'm happy to see it. If any listeners are using Google Chrome out there, you should not be. Google Chrome is, in fact, malware. It's terrible. Firefox is certainly a lot better. However, their extension store, as we've seen this week, due to from banning Dissenter, does seem to be on the censorship train. So it's good to have another option out there in web browsers that is not spyware constantly phoning your information home to the creator.
Whew, harsh words there about Google Chrome. Venshin just sent, and thank you for your summary of that. Venshin just sent $5 in the super chat. He said, that's awesome. I never registered to receive Brave donation because I'd have to do KYC and complicate my taxes. If the Gab fork works, that might be okay. Okay. Yeah, you can play with the Gab browser. That's better than the maybe it'll be better than the Brave browser. I do. Do you guys have any thoughts on this? I didn't prep you guys for this as a topic, but Zach or Tony, do you have anything to say about the Brave Gab situation?
Yeah, I think it's great. Like I kind of hate Gab a little bit, but I appreciate like their conviction, and I wish them all the best in what they do. And I think it's ludicrous to call somebody who forks your project a parasite. But I didn't know actually that Google Chrome and whatever other browser app store delisted the Gab chat forum app. yeah, I mean, the project's like trying to do the right thing. See what happens with its future, but Brendan's response, it sounds pretty dumb. So
Yeah.
that's the extent of my opinion.
You gotta be, if you put your stuff out there, you gotta be ready in this space for somebody to fork off of it. I mean, that's it's been going on for a little while here in the crypto space. And yeah, forks are forks. Tony, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Tony.
Yeah, so many of my friends that are into cryptocurrency, they are using the Brave browser. So which was weird because for me it's like you have to install it, and there is a hassle to install a new browser. But I guess many people are using it, so it's pretty popular. And yeah, why not forking it if the code is open source and basically you can create a better product out of it? Why not? So yeah, I'm all hands for Gab. They are trying to do the good thing,
and like the Brave browser is like pretty good as far as privacy goes, like token issues aside, but also like usability aside. So I've heard that like in the past several months, like the browser usability has improved dramatically. I've used it off and on for like 6 months ago for a couple months. I've used it off and on, and then just switched back to Chrome and Firefox because Brave was just unbelievably unusable. But if that has in fact improved, and if now Gab is like forking it to add these sort of what you might call these like alternative messaging platforms. I don't call them censorship resistant, but they're just like alternative messaging platforms, then that could be a great browser. And I'm always in the market for a better browser. So
cool. All right, I got a question on a different subject for you, Zach. The Adamant Capital report came out, and unfortunately,
yeah.
I didn't get to read the whole thing or read all of it because you had to give your email address, but you can give a fake email address, which I didn't even realize. But one of the conclusions I believe was that a lot of that holders have been accumulating. So can you tell us some things that stuck out in the report to you, or some just points you wanted to share about it?
Yeah. So it's like a 15 page report, I believe. It's been all over Twitter. I highly recommend you reading it. And the DocSend form that they published it via does request an email address. That's just for them to distribute more research in the future. They do record that address, but it doesn't verify the email at all. You can submit a dummy address if you want to read the report, which I recommend you do. Both of those things, submit a dummy address and read the report. Yeah, so the report necessarily wasn't anything groundbreaking. It was just a solid piece of high quality research that confirmed what a lot of people have already been saying, that right now in the market cycle, we're sort of solidly in an accumulation phase. And contrary to the very strong opinions of a few people who predicted that we fall still and find a new bottom in like the high 2000 range, from all appearances, we've sort of found our range in like the 3 to 6K for the next few months or however long this sort of prolonged cycle lasts. But the short and sweet of it is people are accumulating Bitcoin. And again, maybe you should consider doing that too. If you don't, I don't care. You can probably try it later when it's more expensive. But the report is like, they published 2 previous reports in like equivalent phases of the market cycles in 2012 and 2015. And this third report basically says, look, this is where we are again. People are buying Bitcoin. We're sort of at the like hope sentimental indicator phase of the market cycle, and like the gist is just people are buying Bitcoin. They introduced some new metrics, or they just sort of reiterated some new metrics they'd previously introduced in a couple of publications. Adamant has for measuring on-chain data or tracking on-chain data to measure like market sentiment and tracking phases of Bitcoin cycles. But yeah, the TLDR is people are buying Bitcoin. We've probably found a bottom, and we're sort of going to go more or less sideways in a certain range for a little while. But good report.
Well, I'm glad to know that the strong hands are accumulating, and in a few years, the weak hands will be like, "Well, I didn't know," or "You got lucky," or come up with some excuse. But the report's out there, so I'll read it. Did you any other big thoughts from the report, Zach? Any other conclusions?
Not really. It's like it's very dense in they parse everything of like this phase of the market cycle we're in compared to equivalent periods in previous cycles and from the all-time high a year and however many months ago. But that's the gist of it. Like the title pretty much gives you all you need to know from a high level. And he just goes very deep over a dozen or so pages and explains exactly why. But if you're interested in sort of knowing where we most likely are in Bitcoin's current cycle, or if you want to send sort of like a very polished, robust, peer-reviewed research product to friends who are interested in Bitcoin, like this is an excellent resource to share. Adamant always does great research. So yeah,
All right.
That's all I have to say.
So the fiat freaks will like it too. You know, they'll like that. All right. Tony, or did you hear about this at all? Or I don't want to put you on it. Or Jeff, did you have any thoughts on it? I didn't assign the report.
Not really, but I've got a comment. I'm watching your channel because you are always giving people this advice, wait 210,000 blocks. And other people, like, they are trying to do the reports, they are trying to draw some lines on the chart, and they are like guessing, oh, maybe Bitcoin will go up in terms of fiat, maybe like next quarter, maybe like after the summer, maybe after the winter. And you are always giving this great advice, just wait 210,000 blocks. And I think that's the best advice.
Yes, remember, I'm saying not to wait to buy in 210,000 blocks. Sure. Just wait to see what it's going to be worth in 200. Make sure you have it, and then you'll be pretty happy in 210,000 blocks. Yeah, I simplify it a lot. And some people write giant reports on it. Some people, and it's cool to write a giant report on it. But then some people make all these crazy charts and they worry about the price from day to day. I'm not a big fan of that. I like reports. I'm not a big fan of the magical charts, which predict magical numbers in a magical amount of time or whatever. I try to just have people have strong hand, long-term thinking. I'm glad you appreciate that. You're not impulsive. You defer gratification. Jeff, any thoughts on the report or anything, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much concur with you guys. Short-term price has never been interesting to me. You know, the reason I spend time in Bitcoin is because I'm interested in the long-term ability of sound money to potentially change the world. And that's why, I tend to focus my time more on studies in that regard, and also, contributing myself to open source projects to get, that back-end technology we were talking about, making, helping in any way I can with that. Short-term price, not my wheelhouse.
All right, good segue there. How's Libra Patron going on, and what is that exactly for those not familiar?
Yeah, so Libre Patron is an extension, or I guess you would say a plugin for BTC Pay server. If you're running a BTC Pay server, it's just one extra command to spin up a Libre Patron. And in short, it's a Patreon clone. I put it together attempting to emulate all the major features of Patreon. So if you're a Bitcoiner and you're currently a Patreon user, you can just slide right over to Libre Patron and you shouldn't see too big of a disruption. One of the things that I did build into it so that you don't necessarily have to maintain a separate Patreon and Libre Patron is the ability to process fiat payments through credit cards. So even though it's attached to BTC Pay server, which obviously means it takes Bitcoin and Lightning payments on a recurring basis, people can also sign up if you activate it using a credit card, and that's processed through Square. So the advantages here are, number one, it's self-hosted, so you can't be censored the way so many people have been censored on Patreon. Number two, it's backed by Bitcoin, so you can obviously get paid in Bitcoin. And number three, even if you don't care about any of that stuff at all, it saves you money because it doesn't take 10% off the top the way that Patreon does. I don't take any fee at all. This isn't a business for me. This is a project that I put out there with no monetization strategy whatsoever. So if you're interested in checking it out, just install BTC Pay server. If you go to librepatron.com, you can see the instructions for the extra couple commands you run to spin up Libre Patron along with your BTC Pay server, and you're good to go. You're totally self-hosted, you're sovereign, and you can start getting some recurring donations if you're a content creator.
And check him out. Jeff's link, his Twitter is below, and you can find all his stuff on his Twitter too. Tony, I've got I guess a broad question on your channel. You bring up some Lightning stuff. You are a technical guy. I don't want to put you on the spot or anything. What are some lightning news out there you think people might be interested in? Or you could talk about your Raspberry Pi thing that you mentioned on your channel. I thought that was pretty cool.
Sure. So I'll plug it in because there are guys who are, for example, doing projects like that. I don't know if it's visible, but you can basically spin off your own Bitcoin Lightning node on your desk on Raspberry Pi and do the Lightning Network transactions. So I'm just the educator. I'm just trying to let people know how to do that and what's the latest technology. About Lightning Network, I think the recent news is about those loop-in types of payments, because with Lightning Network, there is a problem. If you are creating a channel to somebody, for example, I want to pay you Adam, I would have to create a channel to somebody with my Bitcoin funds on it, and it's only only good if I'm transferring up to this amount that is on my channel. But what if this amount is getting used? I would have to take money from somebody else on the Lightning Network. Those are basically one-way channels. And there is a new invention by Lightning Labs. They are proposing this kind of software loop in, loop out, that basically you can create a submarine swap with your peers, and you can basically refund those channels again. So that's a great tech. We had this interview with Peter Reason today on the What Bitcoin Did podcast with Peter McCormack. He's a great enemy of the Lightning Network. So one of his points is that those channels can't be balanced, and right now with this new technology, loop in, loop out, we can balance the channel better than before. So yeah, we are moving forward, incrementally, step at the time, just moving forward with the technology, and I think we will get there sooner or later.
Yeah, I heard about this, and I did not explain it well on my show. You did a good job there. And again, people, check him out. He is linked to below, and he's got all sorts of informative videos that get into the tech side of things. All right, so yeah, we're at the end here. So I want everybody to give their conclusionary thoughts, anything that was left out. Zach, we'll start with you. Zach, what happened to Zach?
He is gone.
Oh my God, Zach! He dropped off. Well, I guess he gave his conclusionary remarks. Then we'll go to Jeff. What anything you wanted to add that was left off the show?
No, I mean, I think we covered. It wasn't a super busy news week. We got the holiday coming up this weekend, so that might have been part of the reason. But like always, you always got to keep up with the tech news out there. I think it's really important, if you are interested in the space, to keep up with a lot of these improvements like Lightning Loop that was just mentioned. That's a huge one that I think is going to make things a lot easier for merchants going forward, particularly because the biggest obstacle for merchants right now that want to accept Lightning is that inbound capacity. And Lightning Loop really attacks that issue head on. So just a good week. Good to see stuff like that still coming out, new developments, things getting easier to use.
Awesome. All right, Tony, you'll get the final word.
Yeah, so for me and for everybody else, just keeping up with the times, maintaining your Bitcoin account. Be sure that it's all secure and well stored. Be sure that you are keeping up with the technology, because as we said, we are moving forward, and the technology is just expanding. So yeah, those are great times.
Awesome. Well, Tony, great first time appearance on the show. You'll be back. I hope everybody checks out your channel. I hope everyone checks out your Twitter, and Jeff's and Zach, because they tweet some great stuff out there. You can follow me on Twitter, people. I'm TechBalt, TechBalt. You can watch all my old shows at disruptmeister.com. And tomorrow is one of my 2 days off during the year because it's Passover. Passover is going to start in a few hours here. So everybody, I'm Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, Disrupt Meister. Subscribe to the channel. Pound that like button, and bang that bell button. Shabbat Shalom. Happy Passover. See you guys on Sunday. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.